Hello, my quilting friends. My name is Leah J, and welcome to episode 87 of the podcast. And today I'm chatting with Katie Baker. She is a bag maker, and she's just come out with a signature black collection, her first collection of handmade bags that she's selling on Etsy. And you can find her website at bakerlanestudio.com. So I really enjoyed this conversation with Katie and learned so much about her process of creating these bags and how she's listing them on Etsy. I really hope that you'll go and check them out and learn more about Katie. Now, what am I working on? I always share a little intro with what I'm working on around the house and what's in progress. I really enjoy being able to give you a sneak peek of what's going on behind the scenes. Sometimes I find, like with a new pattern or a project, it can be several months in progress. And being able to share this with you in the intro really helps me stay on track and keep up with my goals. So I really enjoy being able to do this. So I am working on my Singer 12. This is a very old treadle sewing machine, and I am so proud of how the tabletop has turned out. So this was in really rough shape whenever I bought it. I got this for $65 in an antique store back last spring, and it was really, really rough. This was actually the nicest piece on the whole cabinet because this is the drop leaf. This is a very simple treadle cabinet. And so this was obviously in storage and it was kind of folded down, so it wasn't nearly as damaged as the tabletop. But I took it and sanded and sanded and sanded like crazy. And then I did a new stain. This is a gun stock finish. I really love it. It's kind of almost a cherry red kind of color, but it really brought out the color of the wood. And then I've sprayed it with 5 coats of lacquer outside. So it is looking really pretty now. And I am in the process of putting this back together. And I got the machine I got all the screws more or less in the right places. And it is working. The hand wheel is turning and it is going now, which when I bought it, it absolutely was frozen. It was rusted shut. It absolutely wouldn't move. But I kind of started feeling guilty as I put all the pieces back together. I really hadn't polished them nicely. So I am sitting here with my metal polish cream that I got from the auto parts store, and I'm giving all of these parts a nice polish before I put it. I'm gonna probably take all the screws that I put into the machine back off the machine, polish everything, put it all back together again. And I got a lot of screws to go through. The screws itself especially were really in rough shape. They were really, really rusted. And it just makes them look so much nicer to just do a little bit of the metal polishing. And that's why I'm wearing gloves today, just so I don't get this stuff on my hands. It's not actually all that toxic. It just smells like ammonia, and you kind of goop it on. And then what really helps is I usually do like a little puddle of this stuff on a bit of cotton cloth. And then I just scrub it back and forth. And the one bad thing is that most of the screw heads, have kind of slightly gotten stripped out, and so they're a little rough on the surface, and so they keep catching on all my towels. So a little bit of a struggle, but I did get myself a new Dremel tool attachment, so I might take them all back out to the barn and just grab that Dremel tool and polish them up with that. So I'm kind of tempted, but it's a snow day. We had 4 inches of snow, which is huge for my area of North Carolina, actually pretty much any area of North Carolina. We don't get snow often at all. And the fact that we got 4 inches of snow, plus a little layer of ice on top before Christmas, and James is probably gonna be out of school for at least half the week for this. It's a big deal. We don't get snow like this. We don't get weather like this. And so no one is prepared. No one, knows what to do. And we all kind of hunker down and, kind of feel snowed in for a few days. So yeah, I'm enjoying being inside, and I know I could go out to the barn, but it'll take at least a couple hours to crank up the heaters and get it nice and toasty warm. So I'm content to hang out in here and just do as much polishing as I can on these pieces while I can. So that is what I'm working on today, and it has been, I gotta say, I'm just so happy to have this machine right here. This is where I'd like to be able to play with it. My fireplace is right behind me, and ideally I could have a fire going and then sit here and use my treadle, and it'll be the best sewing machine in the house, quite honestly. but I'll be honest, I have no idea if it's actually going to work. The bobbin case, and I think it's called a boat bobbin or a shuttle bobbin. I'm not exactly sure what the exact terminology is for this particular type. It's a little bit stuck in here, but basically the little prong, the little bar that goes across the side of the bobbin broke off as I was cleaning it and getting all the rust off. So I don't actually know if thread will feed from that properly. Also, the bobbin winder itself is pretty much shot, so I'll need to wind bobbins on my other Singer treadle, which is out in my crafty cottage. So yeah, I don't actually know if it will stitch. That's still a big giant question mark. And if it doesn't stitch, I'm going to pursue other options. This particular footprint, I think there are other machines that can go into this treadle cabinet on this footprint. Even some newer, like 1950s electric machines. I need to go back and review that treadle episode that I did with Cheryl Warren, and she told me about some different machines and makes that could possibly fit into this cabinet and go, and I could actually turn them into treadles. I could take the motor off and still be able to run it off of the belt with the treadle. So I don't know, I'm going to pursue that. I'm going to look around, and certainly if you have any suggestions, if this machine just absolutely cannot work, and it is a Singer 12 fiddle base, and so that means that it's actually a smaller treadle. It has a smaller harp space, a smaller arm. And if you have a suggestion for something that could go and become a treadle machine instead of being an electric machine, please let me know. I'd love to have different options and things to look for on eBay because that will be where I'm going if I need to find another machine to go in this cabinet. Because really, I pursued it, and I learned so much from fixing up that machine, and I really, really enjoyed it. But I do want a working machine. I don't want to just have a nice cabinet with a, basically big paperweight in the middle of it. I really do want it to work. I want something in here that actually works. And I still have the cabinet, the drawers to finish up. That was the one last piece that I haven't sanded. It's still out in the barn. It's on my list. The barn's just really full right now, and I need to go out there and just totally clean it up. It's like all the organization has just completely run out the window in this last month of the year. And so I need to get out there and get serious and clean things up and get back on track and put everything away. It's just been really hard to get out there and do it. I think in several ways, my habits, my nice, solid, stable habits that I have kept going since the beginning of the year have kind of started to crumble a little bit. And I had to check in on that this morning, especially because of the snow day. I didn't have to get up early, and so I stayed in bed, and it was like, I'm feeling frustrated that I'm not getting as much stuff done, and I'm not, actively getting closer towards my goals. Well, part of the reason why I'm frustrated is because I'm not doing those things that make those goals easy to accomplish, like getting up early, exercising, making sure that I am, my brain is kicking at an early time so that way I can get more work done before the guys get up. All of that kind of stuff has kind of fallen to the wayside a little bit in the last couple of weeks, and I'm noticing the difference. So I got to get back on track in a big way. And it's tough, especially sometimes I just get tired and I'm just kind of like, I just want a break. And I had that cold from last week that just lingered and lingered and lingered, and I did not feel well for at least a week. And it's tough when kind of all of those habits go away when you're feeling really bad too. So yeah, I gotta journal a little bit. Gotta kind of watch a few inspiring videos on YouTube, I think, and just kind of get myself back on track with that. But one thing I'm really excited to be working on, I got my prototype of Mally the Maker all dressed up. So, oh my gosh, this was so much fun. Dad and I took 2 days to work on her, and I had a blast. So I wanted to play with different materials, and I think that this is really good. It's one thing if we all work with quilting cotton all the time, but there are a lot of other types of fabrics out there, and it's really good to be able to use a wider range than just quilting cottons. So I made Mally's shirt out of a stretchy knit fabric, and I'm probably going to do the pattern where I'll offer the shirt in the stretchy knit fabric so you can try the knits, and then you can also do the same shirt, but it will have probably a button or Velcro back for a quilting cotton shirt, because cotton, the major difference is it doesn't stretch. I would not be able to pull the shirt over her head if it wasn't for the knit fabric. So yeah, that was an experiment, and I really enjoyed playing around with that. Put a stretch needle in my machine. Haven't had one of those in there in quite some time. But the real accomplishment was her pants. And when I told Josh my original goal was to make pants with working pockets, real live pockets, he was like, why are you going to bother to do that? Like, why would you, why bother? And I was like, it's the challenge. I want the challenge of not just making a really nice fitting pair of pants, but also to make it real, to make it have a real button fly, to make it have real working pockets. Because, and really making this kind of helped me tap into when I was a little girl. I found it so frustrating when things weren't real on dolls. So, I can remember getting a doll and she had like a button-up shirt and it looked like those buttons would work, but no, they were stitched in place permanently, so her shirt couldn't come off without ripping the doll, ripping the shirt off basically. And I can just remember thinking, man, that's cheap. And I was a kid and I was very judgmental about, when the clothing wasn't real, when the pockets were just stitched on and they didn't actually work and you couldn't, tuck her hand down in her pocket like that. That just bugged me. I know, totally neurotic, but it's something I remembered and something that I find really, really important. And, the first thing I did was make sure that I had a really good fit. And that took 6 prototypes to get a good fit. And Dad and I kept, adjusting this and adjusting that and playing with this and playing with that. And we've really struggled over her button fly, trying to get the fabrics to do the right things with the seam allowance and everything else. And we were arguing about how to do it the right way. And I finally said, okay. I checked in. I was like, let me go grab a real pair of pants that I actually wear. So I grabbed a real pair of pants and took a look at that and how that was constructed. And so basically these pants are constructed the exact same way that a real pair of jeans are constructed. And, designing this, it made me realize just how easy that could be. And I could, possibly start designing clothing for people, not just dolls. But yeah, that was just really neat. And her back pockets, she's got back pockets, of course. Now, these are some pretty wild colors. I just grabbed scrap fabric for cutting this out just to, test and have different colors for everything. So that way I could really see what I was working on and know the difference between the different pieces. I have some denim fabric coming from Spoonflower that I'm going to test next. But yeah, it took 7 prototypes of the pants. I need to do 1 more prototype of the shirt and test that. But yeah, Mally will be, and I also need to make the shirt in quilting cotton too and design the back and all that 9 yards. But Mally will be coming soon. She will be another new doll pattern to go along with Miss Bunny. And that's really exciting. I have thoroughly enjoyed pursuing these dolls and playing around with that, and I have learned so much in this process. I really feel like this was a awesome challenge, and I really like the direction that I'm going in with this. So yeah, I have had a blast designing Mally and her working clothes. I love that. That just makes me so happy. So be looking forward to that coming soon. And just in case you haven't heard of Mally, this is a quilt fiction novel. It's a fantasy novel about a 10-year-old little girl and her adventures in a magical quilt world. And if you're looking for a cool gift to give to a daughter or a granddaughter or any kid, 10 years old and up is really where I think the best age range is. So you can come and find the book at mallythemaker.com. And yeah, the book I think makes a really good gift for someone that you'd like to inspire to take up stitch work, because that's what Mally does throughout the world of quilts. She has to stitch her way out of many sticky situations and learns a lot along the way. So I hope that you'll come and check that out. One last thing, we have had an awesome start to the Friendship Quilt-Along. That is the yearly Quilt-Along that's going to run through 2019. And this week I shared a tutorial on how to quilt our first Scrappy Star quilt block. You can come and find that video and everything linked up together at leahday.com/quilt-along. friendship. I also shared a video on basting your blocks. If you're confused about that at all, definitely check that out too. So you can find the block patterns, you can find all of the tutorials I've shared so far at leahday.com/friendship. So that's pretty much it for what's going on around the house. I'm going to continue polishing up my pieces and hopefully getting everything put back together on this treadle today. And I hope that you enjoyed this interview with Katie Baker and learn more about quilting on unusual materials like vinyl and leather. Until next time, let's go quilt. Hello, my quilting friends. My name is Leah Day, and I'm here with Katie Baker from BakerLaneStudio.com. Welcome to the show, Katie.
Hi, Leah.
So a little introduction, Katie is a home quilter who recently started a business selling handmade free motion quilted bags and accessories. She has a beautiful signature black collection of bags that all feature beautiful free motion quilting on vinyl or leather fabrics. So that's what we're going to talk about today, quilting on weird fabrics. And I am so inspired by your pictures. They're absolutely gorgeous. So let's just start with this. Number one, what did you get started with quilting, and then what made you want to start playing with the weird stuff?
So I started quilting, I think it's about 5 years ago. I was trying to do the math earlier, and very traditional substrates. I got some quilting cotton and some batting, and I went at it. My roommate at the time had made quilts with her grandmother. Really, her grandmother had made these quilts, and I really admired them, and I've done every craft imaginable at this point, and so that was one I wanted to try. So I got myself like a $15 Craigslist sewing machine, and it took me hours to cut up a jelly roll, and I sewed it together and actually did free motion on my very first wall hanging because I wanted to see if I could. Mm-hmm. And then it took me 3 more quilts to ever do it again. But I dove right in. I watched a bunch of your videos and just taught myself online whatever I could find on the internet. Went for it. So,
absolutely.
And so I did that for pretty much, I mean, I only started quilting on weird things in the last year, so the first 4 years was all pretty traditional quilts.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah, and so what is your favorite weird fabric to quilt on? And when were you, like, in a store? Like, when did that magic happen? Were you like, oh, wow, here's some leather pants? So how did that happen?
I haven't actually really done the breadth of weird fabrics there are to find, although I just got a swatch of some like stretch cosplay holographic fabric that I'm itching to try. But for the most part, it's been marine vinyls of various kinds that they sell it started at Joann's. I saw a bag pattern. There's a designer who does really nice YouTube videos of her bag patterns, and I was like, I think I could do that, which is how all of my projects start. And I was just planning on making it out of white vinyl, and it never crossed my mind to quilt it until I brought it home, and I thought about all like the bags I'd seen with like the grid line quilting. And I tried that on my machine, and that went fine, and it was so easy that I was like, free motion would be fun. And so I just switched to my, like, darning foot and tried it out, and it worked. And I was like, all right, well, we've got a thing here.
Yeah. So who was the quilter or the bag maker on YouTube that you were watching?
Yeah, her name is Sarah Lawson. Her channel is So Sweetness. And I actually ended up posting the bag I made in her Facebook group, and it really caught fire. And that's when I was like, oh, it's not just me who likes how this looks. And that's pretty much when my business started, was someone wanted to buy it. And I was like, oh, sure, okay, we can do that.
Yeah, that's the best kind of business where it's like, oh, you want this? I have this? Yes, I can sell this. Okay, yeah, and it totally makes sense. Like that's, in my opinion, that's like the best way because it's natural. You made something, you put it out there, and someone liked it, and then you got that immediate positive gratification. So I think that's excellent. And let's just talk about how does it feel to stitch through? Because I've honestly never tried this. I've never done any of this. I mean, I've sewn through, quilted silk, and I've quilted, I think, some fake. It was like I'm losing the word. It's kind of later than usual, so if I'm a little glitchy, that's why. I think it was like a fake suede. There you go, faux suede. There you go. I finally got the word. So I've quilted a little bit on that kind of stuff, but I've never done anything thicker. I've never done vinyl. I've never done leather. So just tell me what you're using. Are you using a batting? Are you using backing? What's your process? Let's just break it down.
So I don't usually use a backing because my favorite bags to make have separate linings because I don't enjoy binding. And most of the ones that are quilted all the way through have binding in them. And especially if you're looking to sell bags, binding is not cost effective. So I usually do a layer of foam interfacing. Pellon makes one called Flex Foam, and I just got a 15-yard bolt of it by Andy of the Soft and Stable. And I had used that before I even got to the vinyl. I'd made a couple bags with quilting cotton, and I had used that. So I was familiar with that already. And so I don't usually use a backing, so by some definitions of quilting, I'm not doing it. But, and then I just baste the vinyl to it. I usually cut a piece that's bigger than I need it. I try to get all the pieces I'm going to need for a given bag at one time because it's harder to quilt the edges than the middle. So the fewer edges I have, the happier I am. And then... the thing to know about vinyl is it varies wildly in how stiff it is. So there's a lot of vinyl out there, and I spend a lot of time getting samples from companies to see if it will be the right thing. Because if it's too thick, it's kind of a bear to sew through, but the other problem is if it's not pliable, the loft of the foam doesn't come through. And so then you're drawing on your vinyl, and that's fun, but it's way cooler if it's got the loft. And so you need to find a nice flexible vinyl in order to really make the most out of that. So but the stuff I started with works pretty well. It's at Joann Fabrics. They've got it in 10 different colors. It's marine vinyl. And I started there. I've since, really spread my wings into all the different companies and what they have to offer. And the same thing is true of leather, too. Leather gets sold by different weights. And so I've used, something called plonge, or I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's between 1 and 2 ounces per square foot. And so it's really thin and flexible, and it really shows the quilting off nicely. So.
Nice. And roughly let's talk prices, because I know a lot of people that are getting into this going, wow, that sounds expensive. So let's just talk prices at Joann's, just get into it with marine vinyl. How much is that a yard? Do you know off the top of your head?
It's $20 a yard, but then of course coupons. So it's always 50 something inches wide, which is really nice. So it's a little more cost effective that way. It's not really more expensive than nice quilting cotton. And then I've paid up to full price. The vinyl was $36 a yard. I think I paid $17 or something for it. But there's vinyls out there that I'm lusting after that are $60 a yard, and I haven't pulled the trigger on that because that's just that's steep. And I know leather can get expensive too. Do you have a Tandy leather near your house? Is that where you're buying the leather? We have one about 30 minutes away, and I haven't been there yet. I know there's no cheaply coming out of there. All of my money is staying there if I go in. So I've been a little nervous, and I haven't actually done a ton of quilting on leather because it is more expensive and less forgiving. And so I've just been a little nervous. I just made a whole leather bag this week, but that was the first one where it was like beginning to end leather. But I've bought it online. There's a company called Peggy Sue also, which is a very strange name, and they sell leather in a lot of different colors, and they sell it both on their website and on Etsy. But one of the nice things is that you can buy like 12 by 12 squares, or like enough to really try it instead of just a swatch, but before you're getting into like $50 to $100 of hide. So that's been a nice way to like test some things out, and I can make like a little wristlet. If I cut it just perfectly, I can make it out of the 12 by 12 square.
Nice. I love that. You know, it's being able to get your feet wet with something with a small investment and not have to buy an entire yard of something. That's really, really good. So tell me about your sewing machine. What are you sewing on now? I know you said you started with a Craigslist. It
didn't take me long to change that.
What was that machine that you found on Craigslist, just so we know?
I'm sorry, what?
What was that machine that you bought on Craigslist?
I have no idea. It was, I think, from the 90s. It had, like, you know, the plastic that had changed colors a bit. The spool thing was broken.
It doesn't even deserve a brand name. Poor machine.
Might have been a brother, but I don't know. I didn't keep that one very long. It didn't take me long in quilting to know that I wanted a little more harp space. And so I got vintage 1591, Singer 1591, which I totally took apart and put back together and like figured out how it worked, and I quilted on that for a while. And now I have another vintage machine that I do like the linings on sometimes, but my main machine you will be familiar with because I first saw it on your videos and I wanted one, and it's the Janome Horizon 7700.
Nice, very nice, good.
I saw it on your videos and I was like, someday I want a machine that big, and I couldn't even dream of affording one, and someone was selling it on Craigslist. I was its third owner, and I jumped all over that. So
awesome. Yeah, that's a good little machine. Well, big little machine. It's one of the biggest home machines I ever had. So yeah, that's really, really good. And that's got a great foot for free machine quilting too. So I bet you're loving that. And let's talk about that. Stitching through and making, like, okay, so we've got the quilting down, and you're free motion quilting through the soft and stable and through the weird fabric, whether it's vinyl or leather. But when it comes to actually sewing the bag, you're finishing number one. And I checked out all your photos. I like stalked your Etsy shop. But your finishing is phenomenal. I mean, like every seam matches, and your hardware is awesome. And it's like they're just gorgeous photos. They really, really are. So tell me about how you stitch through those thick layers, how you get that excellent finish. Is there any tips that you could help somebody else that was getting into this?
So the other really nice thing about this particular machine, but lots of machines have walking feet, but this one has a built-in walking foot that you can use, and that is really nice. And a lot of Janomes of the higher level Janomes have that. And now they have ones that are narrower too. My walking foot's pretty wide, and so it's hard to get into some of those tricky seam allowances. But there are lots of aftermarket walking feet available. So I always use a walking foot because vinyl or leather can be a little sticky. People like Teflon feet too. I've never used a Teflon foot for this, but other people like it for cork fabric too. But I just like to have even feed because you really want your pieces to match up and to stay the same size. And if they're shifting, and they can get pretty bulky, so you really don't want them to shift. So that's a big thing. And let me tell you my huge tip for finishing details. Use matching thread.
Yay!
Matching thread covers a multitude of sins. You might think that it would be fun to use contrasting thread and that it would look cool. And it does look cool, but it is unforgiving. Yeah. And I just have learned that I'm not going there. I put contrast in other places. I do it in the quilting sometimes, but I don't want to be drawing eyes to where things might not be perfect. And so that's the key to that.
Yeah. And you look at designer handbags, like, just images and stuff in fashion magazines. Most of those are stitched with matching thread for exactly the same reason. So it's like, I think take your cues from what works for Gucci or Prada. I don't even know these companies, but you know what I mean? Like all those other, guys, and they usually use matching thread, and they're not doing any level of the detail or quilting that you're doing. So I think that's really neat, and you can do that contrast. You can get that pop with the quilting side of it. And that's before you're really finishing and needing things to match up and that kind of thing. So tell me about your hardware. What's your favorite hardware brand?
I got a big package from a company called Emmeline Bags. They're in Canada, but they've got a lot of stuff in a lot of colors. And if you are selling hardware, they've got like a special pricing for people who are reselling, which is really nice because hardware can add up fast. And then I also really like hardware from a company called More Me No, which I've got a little pin here. It's her name spelled out kind of phonetically, so I can send you that link if you need it. But those are my favorites, and I really like to use hardware. I think that it's a nice, it's expensive to add as a hobby sewer, but as a seller, I think that it packs a lot of punch. I can easily add $10 of hardware and make the bag look way more expensive.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a good investment in the product to do that. And so,
yeah,
that's kind of how I've done it. And that my aesthetic is a little more slightly into like the alternative punk, little edge of punk rock in there. And so none of my bags are too far in that direction, but I've always had a thing for hardware. So
yeah. I haven't seen anything with like studs or like spikes sticking out. So you're not letting that freak flag fly quite enough yet.
Not yet. The first collection is meant to be kind of a neutral collection, and future ones might have maybe a stronger point of view, but probably I won't ever go too far into spikes. It's nice to have something glittery in there.
Yeah. And I mean, at the same time, though, I would encourage you to to kind of let yourself go completely weird and like scratch that itch and make something like that you would like just be super, super excited to carry around. I think that's really good. And then that can you can take things from that and be like, okay, well, somebody else might not like it going this far, and then pull back from that and, design a whole collection based on that. I think that's a really good thing, to let yourself go and not feel like you're holding yourself back from your true inspiration, So tell me about your designs. Are you designing the bags or are you working off of patterns?
My current collection is a little bit of both. I'm still a pretty new bag maker. I really came at this because of the quilting side of things and kind of got thrown into the bag making side along the way. So I would say maybe 60%, I'm not doing the math on the top of my head, is other people's patterns. And then a few of them I designed myself, which is nerve-wracking but really exciting. And then a few of them are someone else's pattern that I have altered into. I don't follow direction very well. I always have my own way I want to do things, and so like the big tote bag, for example, is two patterns that I smashed together and then totally like.
Yeah, you started on a base template and then kind of modified it and made it your own. And just in case someone is worried and kind of thinking copyright, bags are not covered by copyright. That's how you can get knockoff Gucci bags. You can get knockoff Prada bags. None of this can be copyrighted because it's a utilitarian thing. So even the patterns, it's like a gray area. Even patterns can't be copyrighted. And aside from that, you're making something to sell anyway. You're not copying a print pattern. So just in case somebody's kind of, a red flag is going up, and we have 2 podcast episodes on copyright too. So if you want more information on that, please go listen to those episodes. Okay, so cork. I was curious about cork. Have you tried quilting with that yet? Have you tried making a bag out of it?
I haven't yet. I have seen someone else who has, but I haven't seen a lot of people free motion quilt it. I'm trying to remember how much I've seen people walking foot quilt it. And I think some, but it's not, it doesn't seem to be the go-to material, and I don't know if that's for good reason or if it's just a frontier that hasn't been discovered yet. To a certain extent, you have to worry about, you don't want to perforate things. And so you need it to not, your stitch length to not be so short that, but I've never had anything rip at a quilting, and I do pull on them and check. So I just haven't done it yet. It's way pricier to buy. Maybe not more so than leather, but it is more so than like a lot of the vinyls are. So, and I need to buy, I mean, if I'm doing a collection, I didn't use all of it, but I bought 10 yards of the one that like my signature black collection is made out of. I don't know how much I'd need, but a lot of cork is sold in half-yard increments. I think that's a convenient way to ship it and to sell it for people. And so I haven't figured out a good way for that to work for me and my business so far, but I really would like to try it because it's beautiful.
Yeah. So let's go back, because that one, you just said something that really kind of clicked with me. So when you were planning out your collection, you just bought a whole ton of black vinyl and said, I'm going to make this collection. It's going to be made out of this stuff. And that's got you started. That's how you did it?
That's not how it started. Because I didn't start with the collection. I started with a couple random bags that people liked. And then I realized, I think I'm going to make a business out of this. And so I started seeing what kind of advice there was about starting a handmade business. And I found people who really advocate for making collections, like a 10-piece collection that goes together and has a name, and it feels special if it's all one thing together. And so I decided to do that. But the first bag sold in February, and I didn't actually start sewing my new collection until like September. All of that was planning what patterns I was going to use and setting up my business and my branding and my logo and all of that kind of stuff, and figuring out what I wanted to sell, but not actually sewing any of the things that got sold. And so at that point, I knew I just wanted to do the one color vinyl. I found a black that I love the feel of, because I don't want it to feel plasticky or, it doesn't do me any good to make a labor-intensive handbag if when someone buys it, it feels plasticky.
Yeah.
So I just went ahead and bought the whole bolt, and I figured that I didn't use the whole thing for the collection, but I have a feeling that I will use black again. So
yeah, and it looks amazing. And just to describe it really quickly, if somebody hasn't gone to Katie's website and checked it out, basically, all of the bags in this collection are black vinyl, and then her quilting on top of it is very rich. She's usually quilting with like swirls and usually some pebbles and stuff in there, and that just really pops out, and it has a beautiful relief effect. Please go check out her bags. We'll probably put a few images here in the video, so that way you guys can see it. It's just absolutely gorgeous, and like I said earlier, her finishing is spectacular. So I just really love that. Like I've seen this kind of stuff for years, and I've never thought of, and how I work is always in systems. It's kind of like break something down into smaller bits. This is how I write books. So it's like what you just said kind of clicked for me, like, wow, okay, get a whole bolt of something, run through it, make tons of stuff out of that thing, and then you have a whole collection to sell, and that makes lots of sense. So how many of each bag did you make? Did you just make one of each bag or multiple copies?
I made, of the actual handbags, I made 3 of each. And then for these kind of accessory size things, I made somewhere between 4 and 6 of each. And how I picked that was mostly random as to how many I did at any given time. The bags are way faster to make if I make them at the same time.
Yes, production.
So if I think that 3 might ever sell, it is cheaper for me in terms of labor to sew them at the same time. And that also means that I'm in the zone, I know what I'm doing, I'm less likely to make a mistake, they all look the same. So that's just, a bag that would take 6 hours if I made it individually might only take 4 if I'm making it as a set. So
that makes sense. That really does. And it also makes sense, just like budgeting your time. Like once you sew a bag and okay, this is going to take 3 hours or this is going to take 6 hours, it helps you budget your time too. Because you are still working, this is an extra business. You're working another job too. You want to talk about that for a minute?
Oh, sure. I daylight as a chemist. I'm always problem solving in one way or another. That's part of what I really like about bag making is that there's a way they go together so you don't sew your pocket closed or whatever. So in my day job, what I do is method development in a chemistry lab. And so that's just the way my brain works is always, what is the best way to do this thing?
That is awesome. And I think that's such a good skill to have for what you're trying to do, with the bag making. That's excellent. Because it seems like, your brain kind of works in that way of asking that question and clicking. I think that's excellent. So tell me about how things are going on Etsy. I kind of, like I said, I kind of stalked you on Etsy a little bit. So tell me how that's going, how that has worked out. Are you happy with Etsy? Do you have any advice for somebody else that's getting into this?
It's been going pretty well. I'm at a full 15 sales, which feels pretty good. I broke the 10 mark, which felt really good.
Good.
So I've been happy. I have a class that I'm signed up for to make my own website, and I'll probably do that in 2019, but I doubt I will get off of Etsy just because I know that I like to shop on Etsy. I like being able to see the reviews. I like that Etsy is behind me as a purchaser, and so I don't expect to come off of Etsy. This would just be something I would add, where I have a little more control of how the website looks and get some design in there. But I've been really happy. I had a big Black Friday sale that went well, and I'm still trying to push here for the Christmas season, but I'm worn out. My collection only came out in November, so it's been a big push here in the fall, and I'm ready to just slink away to my couch for a little while. And that's the nice thing about pre-making all the bags too, as opposed to making them to order, is that when someone buys them, all I have to do is ship them out. So they don't have to wait, 6 weeks for me to make one, which is pretty normal on Etsy. And then also, I just got a review talking about how lightning fast my shipping was, but it was just that it was already ready, and so I just took it to the post office. So yeah, that's been really good. In terms of advice for other people, I see a lot of people, I'm in, communities where people who make bags and other handmade items kind of hang out. And I think that people need to do the math more. I realize I'm talking like a chemist, but I see a lot of people who say that no one will want to pay the amount that it would take for them to make this handmade item. And that's, I totally understand that. That's a really hard battle, but I think you need to think about some things you just can't sell for a profit, and you just don't make those things. I could make a really intricate bag and it will take me 20 hours, and it is not the right thing to sell. That is the right thing to wear or to give away or to, and so thinking critically about what works. And then the other thing is to not undersell themselves too. The key, I think, to having someone want to buy your item is to make something that they say wow about, because people have kind of a price threshold about what they're willing to spend on something. And they're generally pretty reserved about it. You know, they've got their idea on how much a t-shirt should cost or whatever, until you make something that like just blows their socks off, and suddenly their idea of what is worth it kind of changes, because suddenly they've never seen that before, and they're more willing to spend for that. And so to like think about what can you do to make your item something that someone can't say no to.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I would say your pricing is excellent. So you want to just tell people straight off the bat, you know, high and low, like your highest priced item versus your lowest price item. I think your prices are excellent because, you know, I go to, and I see a lot of quilts being put up and a lot of different handbags and stuff, and they're usually priced really, really low, as in like, I'm kind of worried that that person is going to eat beans and rice for the rest of their life low. And, you know, it's not sustainable to keep pricing that low. So why don't you just tell everybody the high and low that you have in your shop?
Yeah. So my tote bag, which is the biggest and longest thing to make, is retail at $500. And the smallest and cheapest thing is like a little pouch that's like perfect for putting your headphones in. And I, off the top of my head, can't remember what that's listed at, but it might be like 45 or 50. And you know, there were times that I wanted to get something lower than that, like, you know, just like an entry level, if someone has a $20 bill kind of, but there's nothing I can make in that amount of time. There just isn't. And so I had to just say goodbye to that. And, you know, I didn't want to make something that was below my standards. So
yeah, no, I completely agree with that.
I just didn't.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think kudos to you for having the strength and, you know, courage to do that. Because, you know, that's one of those things. I think a lot of people sell themselves too short because they're not even brave enough to try pricing at a reasonable price. I mean, reasonable as in you get your time and you get your materials and you can eat and keep the, you know, keep the lights on. And I think the other thing that we need to stress is that this is a designer bag, meaning that you are, you know, you are free motion quilting this and you're stitching your name into it. I mean, this is very, if I want to compare it to something like Vera Bradley, of course, Vera Bradley style bags are they have a very floral fabric that she designs and they're quilted differently, but it's kind of that same kind of unique feel that I would say I could compare that side to side. And so, yeah, it's a designer bag. Designer labels are more expensive and they need to cost more. That's the whole idea. So excellent. Thank you so much for sharing.
I have one more thing to say about that, is just that part of that too is, I mean, it is maybe bravery, we'll see, but it's also a luxury of having a full-time job too, right? Like, I don't need to worry about whether or not this will keep the lights on. I would like it to someday, and I'm trying to set myself up so that if it does, it can someday. But the other thing too is that since I have the full-time job, I'm very well aware of what my time is worth, and I'm not afraid to stick up for that. I'm not in the business of working for free. I've got things I can do, you know, in my free time, and so that helps give me the strength to say, no, this really is a 500 bag, even though I was terrified to put that listing up there.
Yeah, no, I think that's wonderful. I think that's really, really great advice, you know, to keep the hours in mind and keep a really clear view on that. I think that's excellent. So this is the question I always ask everyone at the very end of the podcast. And I'm really curious to know, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see this going?
I would really like it to be a major source of our income in 5 years. I don't know that I'm on that trajectory. We'll see, but I would like it to be a possibility. We moved to our current location a year ago, and it was based on my job, and I just kind of yanked my husband along. And I would really like for our next stage of life to be his turn to pick something, and then mine to be like, oh yeah, no, I can take my quilting things anywhere, you know, like that would be perfect. And my truest, deepest goal for the next 5 years is that I desperately want a long arm.
Excellent. Excellent. Do you have space for it right now? Do you have space for one right now?
Oh, depends on how you define have and space. I have measured places. I could probably set it up in some of the smaller configurations. I don't think I could do a quilt-sized one right now, but a lot of them can be set up in like 8 feet, or even really if I could get to 5 feet or 6 feet would be perfect, because that's the width of the vinyl. So if I could get the width of fabric of the vinyl on there, like, that would be golden.
Well,
so.
you know, Grace Kunig has a new hoop frame. You could put your Janome Horizon on it, and it's like 4.5 feet. It's not quite wide enough for what you're wanting, but it's close.
I know. I look at it all the time, but it's not quite the style of frame that I want. I'd rather have the whole.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there.
But trust me, I look at the continuum frame weekly.
Yeah, you can set that up as a half size, just saying. You could get the 10 foot and set it up at 5 feet, and then you'll probably have about 4.5 feet quiltable area. You lose a little bit for your backing and your leader cloth and the whole 9 yards of it. But yeah, I mean, it's just, there's the ways of doing it, but I completely understand. And I really hope that you pursue this and you continue to make more bags and more collections. I cannot wait to see where you go with this, Katie.
Oh, thank you.
So that's it for this episode. Please go and check out Katie's website and Etsy shop. You can find it at bakerlanestudio.com. Until next time, let's go quilt.